I never thought parenting could bring so many challenges, not just for your own child but for blending a family. My name is Sophia and I'm 28. I'm a single mom to an amazing 8-year-old daughter, and I've been dating the love of my life for a few years now. He's 27 and he has a daughter the same age as mine. On paper, our families seemed like a perfect fit. Our daughters got along immediately. They became inseparable almost instantly, like sisters who had always known each other. For the first part of our relationship, he only had every other weekend with his daughter because of a custody battle he was going through. Those weekends were mostly about fun activities and playdates. We all had a great time together and I bonded quickly with his daughter. I thought everything was perfect. But then when he was finally granted 50-50 custody, we began spending much more time together, and I started noticing a problem that I couldn't ignore. His daughter is extremely picky. Not in the way most kids are a little fussy, but in a way that set off alarm bells for me immediately. Her favorite foods are chicken tenders, French fries, and pizza. Vegetables, grains, or anything outside of that small list are almost impossible to get her to touch. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a phase. But over time, it became obvious that her eating habits weren't going to change on their own. I've been through this before with my own daughter. I'm in the military, so I was away from her for about 2 years when she was between 3 and 5. When I returned, I realized she had developed extremely picky eating habits during that time. It took about 6 months of patience, creative strategies, and consistent effort to get her to eat a balanced diet, but we did it. She now enjoys almost anything and she's adventurous with food, which has been crucial since we travel regularly to my home country and other places. I tried sharing my experience with him countless times. I gave him tips that worked for me, explained why balanced nutrition is so important, and even offered gentle advice on how to approach meals with his daughter. But nothing seemed to stick. He listened politely, nodded, agreed, and then nothing changed. Then came last night. We went out for Chinese food, ordered several plates, hoping she might try something new. She took tiny, minuscule bites of 2 dishes, pot stickers and General Tso's chicken, and promptly made faces at both. Then she turned to her chicken fried rice and ate all the chicken while carefully picking around any vegetables. She ignored her carrots and green beans entirely. Her dad said a few words, suggested she try some vegetables and let it go. He threatened no dessert if she didn't eat her vegetables, but when the fortune cookie arrived, she had it and took a lollipop home without issue. Watching all of this, I felt a knot in my stomach. I was frustrated not with the child but with her father. I could see the pattern repeating. No enforcement, no patience, no effort to expand her palate, nothing to challenge the habits that I knew would affect her health and overall lifestyle in the long run. That morning, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with my fiancé. I told him exactly how I felt. If nothing changes, if there's no serious effort to improve these eating habits, this was a deal breaker for me. I couldn't combine our households and pretend it wouldn't affect our family dynamic, our daughter's health, and the balance we needed in our home. He was upset naturally. He said I was being unfair, that I wasn't giving him enough time. But I had been patient for 6 months while our daughters spent equal time with him. I hadn't seen any meaningful action, no change in strategy, no consistency. I realized I was beginning to feel like he expected me to take over all the hard parts of parenting while he waited comfortably on the sidelines. This wasn't just about picky eating. It's about incompatibility in parenting philosophies. It's about the concern that if we moved in together, I would become the evil stepmother overnight, enforcing rules that suddenly disrupt her life and risk damaging the trust and bond we had built. And while I adore his daughter, the truth is, this is a problem that needed to be addressed long before our wedding or moving in together. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had said. I felt a mix of frustration and worry. Frustration because it seemed like I had been repeating myself endlessly, offering advice, sharing proven strategies, and yet nothing had changed. Worry because I knew what this would mean if we combined our households without addressing it first. I could already imagine the tension at dinner tables, the arguments over food, and the silent resentment building in both our daughters. It wasn't that I had any issue with his daughter herself. She's a sweet, loving, and intelligent little girl, and I truly adore her. But her picky eating habits weren't just a harmless quirk. They reflected a lack of boundaries and discipline from her father. And that, to me, was a deal breaker. I knew from experience that children thrive with consistency and guidance, not just love and affection. You can adore a child and still need to enforce rules that are in their best interest. I also thought about my daughter. I had spent years helping her overcome her own challenges. Her picky eating, her early struggles with reading, everything that required patience, persistence, and strategy. I didn't want to enter a blended family where I would be forced to impose the changes, only to be seen as the villain. I wanted parenting to be a team effort, where both parents were committed to the same values and goals. Later that day, I tried to have a calmer discussion with my fiancé. I explained that this wasn't about being controlling or unreasonable. It was about long-term outcomes. I reminded him of the strategies I had used with my daughter. Gradual exposure, patience, positive reinforcement, and consistent expectations. I emphasized that it wasn't an overnight fix, but it required dedication and teamwork. He listened, but I could see the tension in his face. He didn't fully agree. He argued that I was being too rigid, that children need time, and that he had been adjusting to 50-50 custody just as much as his daughter. I tried to remain empathetic, but I knew that the lack of real action over the past 6 months wasn't just a phase. It was a pattern. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was about compatibility, not just parenting. If we were to marry and combine our households, we needed to be aligned on values and expectations. I couldn't compromise on something that would affect our children's health, development, and daily lives. And honestly, I wasn't willing to take on the full responsibility of correcting habits that had been neglected for months. That night, I went to bed feeling anxious. I love my fiancé and I adore his daughter, but I also knew that entering into a marriage without this alignment could lead to resentment, frustration, and conflict. I kept replaying the dinner scene in my head, the tiny bites of new food, the faces she made, and her father's lack of follow-through. It wasn't just about the vegetables. It was about a lack of discipline and effort that could become a major point of contention in our blended family. By morning, my mind was made up. I had to set a clear boundary. I told him that until he demonstrated real commitment to guiding his daughter in developing healthy habits, not just with food but with life skills in general, I could not move forward with combining our households. I explained that this wasn't a punishment, but a necessity for the well-being of our children and the stability of our future family. He was upset naturally. He accused me of being unreasonable, of not giving him enough time. I listened patiently, but my decision was firm. I knew from experience that waiting for change without action rarely worked. Children need consistency, guidance, and collaboration from both parents. And if that collaboration wasn't present, then blending our families could create more harm than good. Thinking back to my own experiences with my daughter, I realized just how much effort it had taken to help her overcome early challenges. When I got her back after being away for 2 years, she was extremely picky with food and struggling with basic skills like reading. It had taken months of patience, trial and error, and consistent strategies to turn things around. Now, she's adventurous with her meals, excited to try new foods, and she's thriving academically. I couldn't imagine going back to a household where I would have to repeat all of that work, this time for someone else's child, while trying to maintain a positive relationship with her and with my fiancé. I wanted a partnership, not a scenario where I would be the enforcer of rules alone, carrying the full responsibility for shaping habits and behavior. It's not that I doubted his love for his daughter. He clearly adores her. But love alone isn't enough when it comes to parenting. Consistency, follow-through, and guidance are what shape children, and those things had been lacking in his household. Watching him let her avoid vegetables, see her pick apart rice grains, and then reward her with a dessert without meaningful consequences was frustrating. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern, and patterns become habits that are hard to break. I also worried about the dynamics between our daughters. They adore each other and are incredibly close, but I feared that if his daughter's habits went unchecked, it could create tension. My daughter has worked hard to overcome her own challenges and had developed a mindset of trying new things, being flexible, and being responsible for her own growth. I didn't want her to feel that her efforts were undermined or that bad habits were rewarded simply because someone didn't enforce expectations. This wasn't about being controlling or judgmental. It was about setting our blended family up for success. I wanted to ensure that both children grew up with similar expectations, with guidance and support from both parents, and in a household where habits were encouraged, not neglected. The thought of walking into a home where these values weren't shared made me uneasy. I also thought about long-term health and well-being. Eating habits at 8 years old often carry into adolescence and adulthood. I didn't want to risk setting up a pattern where one child's health and habits suffered simply because the parent wasn't willing to put in the effort. I knew from experience that small interventions, patience, and strategy could make all the difference, but only if both parents were on board. Over the next few days, I reflected on all of this. I loved my fiancé and I loved his daughter, but I knew that love wasn't enough to merge our families successfully. I had to be honest with myself about what was necessary for our children's growth, for our relationship, and for the household we hoped to create. I knew that if I compromised now, it could lead to frustration, resentment, and conflict later on. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was about compatibility. Our parenting philosophies, our approaches to discipline and guidance, our expectations for our children's habits. All of it had to align for us to succeed as a family. I had to be willing to walk away if that alignment wasn't possible because the stakes were too high for our daughters. By the end of that week, I made a decision. I told my fiancé that I couldn't move forward with combining our households until we saw real, measurable effort on his part to address his daughter's habits. I framed it not as punishment but as preparation, a way to ensure our blended family would have the foundation it needed to thrive. After that conversation, the tension between us was palpable. He was clearly upset and I could see the frustration on his face. I knew he loved his daughter deeply, but love alone wasn't enough. I tried to explain as calmly as possible that this wasn't about me trying to control him or his child. It was about creating a household where both children could thrive, where healthy habits were encouraged, and where both parents were committed to guiding their children. He argued that I was being too rigid, that children need time, and that expecting immediate change was unreasonable. I listened carefully, acknowledging his perspective, but I knew from experience that waiting without consistent effort rarely works. Habits, good or bad, form quickly in children and left unchecked, they become increasingly difficult to change. I explained this to him, using examples from my daughter's own journey, highlighting how consistent guidance had transformed her eating habits, her love for reading, and her confidence. The conversation was emotional. I could feel the love he had for me and for our daughters, but I could also feel the gap between our parenting approaches widening. I realized that this wasn't just about food. It was about discipline, responsibility, and the shared effort required to raise children effectively. If we couldn't align on this now, what would happen when we faced bigger challenges in the future? That night, I thought long and hard about what I was willing to compromise on and what I wasn't. I love my fiancé and I cherish the bond he has with his daughter, but I also knew I couldn't ignore the patterns I was seeing. I didn't want to be the stepmother who suddenly changed everything and risked alienating a child who already adored me. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the long-term consequences of allowing unhealthy habits to continue unchecked. Over the next few days, I reflected on possible solutions. I considered gradual approaches, compromises, and strategies that could help bridge the gap between his parenting style and mine. I wanted him to feel supported, not attacked, and I wanted to maintain the trust we had built. But I also realized that intentions alone were not enough. Actions had to follow. Ultimately, I made it clear that I would not move forward with combining our households until he demonstrated real commitment to guiding his daughter's habits. I emphasized that this wasn't about perfection, but about showing consistent effort, following through with guidance, and prioritizing the children's growth. I explained that this foundation was necessary for our blended family to thrive and for both daughters to feel supported and secure. He took the message hard, but I could see him reflecting on it. I hope that in time he will understand that this isn't about control or criticism, it's about shared responsibility, partnership, and doing what's best for our children. I also hope that our daughters will continue to grow up in an environment where boundaries, consistency, and guidance are respected, giving them the best chance to thrive both emotionally and physically. Looking back on everything, I realize this situation taught me a lot. Not just about parenting, but about relationships, boundaries, and the importance of honesty. Love alone isn't enough to build a successful blended family. Shared values, consistent parenting approaches, and mutual effort are just as important, if not more. I know some people might judge me for making picky eating a deal breaker. It seems trivial on the surface, but it's never really about food. It's about the principles behind it, the willingness to guide, to be consistent, and to take responsibility as a parent. Those principles affect everything from health to education, from discipline to emotional well-being. If we can't align on something as fundamental as this, I can't imagine how we'd handle more serious challenges in the future. My hope is that by setting clear boundaries now, we can create a stronger foundation for our blended family. I want both daughters to feel safe, supported, and loved, but I also want them to grow up with guidance and structure. I want my fiancé to be an active, consistent, and responsible parent. Not just someone who loves his child, but someone who puts in the daily effort to help her grow. So yes, I made a hard choice. I set a boundary and I was honest about what I needed for our family to succeed. It wasn't easy and it wasn't popular, but I believe it's the right decision for the long-term health of our children and our relationship. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's this. Don't be afraid to set boundaries, even in love. Being honest about your expectations doesn't make you unreasonable. It makes you responsible. Protect your children, protect your values, and don't compromise on the foundations that will shape your family's future. If you enjoyed this story and want more real-life family drama, revenge stories, and parenting challenges straight from Reddit, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We share stories that will shock you, make you think, and remind you of the importance of standing firm when it matters most. Don't miss the next story.